This video is brought to you in part by Patreon producers Cameron D, John Belf, and Ralph Nunez. If you'd also like to become a producer, head over to patreon.com/616entertainment for more information. You won't regret it. World Championship Wrestling was the biggest competition Vince McMahon and the WWE ever faced. WCW wasn't always number 2 in that race either. For nearly 2 years straight, the Atlanta-based wrestling promotion bested the WWE in weekly TV ratings. WCW's path is a long, winding road riddled with both colossal triumphs and titanic failures, the dichotomy of which is arguably most apparent when focusing on their video game library. 1998's WCW NWO Revenge, for instance, developed by the legendary Aki Corporation, is regarded to this day as one of the all-time greats in the wrestling game genre. From there, we'll fast forward to their final release, 2000's WCW Backstage Assault. When it comes to describing this one, I think stop-motion animator Captain McKay said it best.
WCW Backstage Assault is responsible for my lifelong history of back pain.
Backstage Assault premiered to largely horrendous reviews, and the game's sales figures weren't looking much better. Publisher EA knew that things had gone horribly awry and scrambled to make the next WCW game better. WCW Mayhem 2, as it was tentatively titled, was scheduled to release on the PlayStation 2 at some point in 2001. EA did the unthinkable in bringing back Aki to bless Mayhem 2 with their tried and true gameplay engine. If you think this story seems too good to be true, unfortunately, you're right. WWE owner Vince McMahon purchased his struggling competitor, and with a smile on his face, he pulled the plug. WCW's dying breath saw Sting take on Ric Flair in the main event of the final Nitro, perfectly mirroring their encounter from the show's very first episode, closing the book on World Championship Wrestling forever. With the WCW license stripped away from the project in the early stages of development, EA had no idea what to do with the now directionless Mayhem 2.
With Aki Corp already on deck just waiting to get started, finding the right team wasn't the issue. Starting over from scratch with no recognizable characters or logos, however, was.
At one point, the game was going to be called Midnight Wrestling, but nothing on the creative side was set in stone. It wasn't until mid-2002 that a pitch for the game's direction really took hold. As video game designer Josh Holmes told OKPlayer.com in 2018, he and his creative partner, Daryl Anselmo, participated in a brainstorming session where they threw out the idea of grounding the game in urban culture, specifically in the hip-hop realm. They figured it was just another silly idea that would go nowhere, but to their surprise, it was met with great enthusiasm. In that same OKPlayer.com interview, Holmes says that Steve Schnurr, EA's head of music, personally loved the idea. He said he knew some people at Def Jam, and that a game featuring rappers in a wrestling ring was fantastic. If that sounds like a garbage can idea to you, you're not alone. Josh Holmes himself hated it as soon as he said it. He tried to talk the room out of it and left the meeting feeling so bad that he was going to be the one responsible for sending Aki to their doom.
That is, until 3 days later when he received a phone call letting him know that he was now officially on the project with Aki as lead producer. Oh, and he had just 8 months to get the game on store shelves.
WCW Mayhem 2 was officially dead, and in its place, we received Def Jam Vendetta. I remember hearing about this game from my friend Bobby Morrissey sometime after it had been released. He came to school one day and said he'd gotten a new game that was basically WWF No Mercy, but it has rappers instead of wrestlers. I had no idea why a game like this would exist, nor did I care. A wrestling game with rappers in it? What's next? A tournament fighter featuring rock bands specifically from the early 2000s? No thanks. Later that week, I was at Bobby's house. He turned on his GameCube and I heard the words,
Def Jam Vendetta.
1 minute into our first match, I was floored. This game was so good. I paused the match and said, dude, this is basically No Mercy but with rappers. He looked me in the eyes and said, yeah, I know, that's what I told you. These animations are lifted straight from the Aki games of old. With every new move I performed, I had flashbacks to the days where our hands were wrapped around his N64 controllers. I felt at home with the game almost immediately. Weak grapples, strong grapples, this was it. Arguably the greatest wrestling game engine of all time, copied and pasted onto the GameCube and PlayStation 2. Inside a project with much better graphics to boot. Performing a finisher requires the player to fill a meter by landing hard-hitting moves. Once you're blazing, it's on.
Look out, here he goes!
These finishing moves are fucking ridiculous. On the topic of match types, the baseline staples are here, from classic one-on-one encounters, to 4-way free-for-alls, to 2-on-2 tag team matches. We've even got a survival mode where the game pits a seemingly endless stream of opponents against us on our quest to earn a high score. Def Jam Vendetta actively tracks our stats as well, which for me is a major plus. I'm a stats nerd. Being able to check up on how many knockouts I've earned in battle to how many submissions I've accumulated in my conquests is top tier on the things I want in a video game list. The game plays like a dream, it goes without saying. I mean, it's Aki. What did you expect?
There are no gimmick matches to speak of, which is kind of a bummer. No table matches, no ladder matches, no cage matches, but in their place, we have a compelling cinematic story mode with a really interesting storyline and top-notch voice acting to boot.
Here's the deal. We choose one fighter from a pool of 4 fictional characters. Our friend Manny is a street fighter. He's banged up and can't compete. This is a problem, Dan Dance, because Manny owes D-Mob money. D-Mob is the big boss, the man in charge of the underground fighting community, and you do not want to be on D-Mob's bad side. We step in for Manny, taking fights on the independent circuit, trying to make a little bit of money to help Manny out of this hole he's gotten himself into. New matches and storylines are introduced in one of 2 ways, either through email via our very 2003 looking cell phone, or through cutscenes. We battle our way through the ranks, one match at a time, earning cash we spend on stat upgrades for our character. The fights start off simple enough, mostly against fictional goons in matches that take place under a highway overpass, but things get crazier and crazier as the story unfolds. Before long, we're battling Ludacris in his own club. DMX makes us fight through an entire company's worth of martial artists in the Dragon House before we can take him on in a fight where he's got home field advantage. On top of all this, our ex-girlfriend is dating D-Mob, and we want her back, even if it means surefire suicide and crossing the boss. Oh, did I mention we already have a girlfriend? And then we've got the option of either defending her honor by playing as her in battle, or telling her to get lost and taking on another girl instead? These girlfriend fights lead to, what else? Unlocking sexy photos of the character's real-life counterpart. How you doing? The deck is stacked against us constantly, but nowhere is it more apparent than the game's final few matches. After conquering the team of Method Man and Redman, after putting down the rabid dog that is DMX, we're called to Def Jam, the biggest stage of them all. D-Mob knows we've been conspiring to get our ex-girl back, and he puts a hit out on us, which leads to an extremely difficult 3-on-1 handicap match. This is right near the end of the story mode, and I do not believe in spoilers, so please, track this game down and play through it. Trust me, you want to feel this ending for yourself.
In most licensed video games, you're not really getting the star that the movie is based on.
That's not Tom Hanks you're hearing in the Toy Story games.
Def Jam Vendetta bucks the trend, not just by using the rappers' real-life voices, but they had each and every cast member come in for creative meetings.
Each rapper was brought in to confirm that they were pleased with their in-game likeness, from outfits to mannerisms. Their lines in the script were often changed on the spot, as most of them felt like they would never be caught dead using the language printed on the page in front of them. Some of the finishing moves have ridiculous names. You want to know why? Because the rappers themselves named their finishing moves. Perhaps the greatest story to come from all this was told to OK Player by the aforementioned lead producer, Josh Holmes. Holmes stated that Ghostface Killah demanded that his finishing move feature an eagle made from his jewelry coming to life to, and this is a direct quote, claw a motherfucker's eyes out. Holmes, who was on the spot and didn't quite know how to tell Ghostface that this wasn't possible, simply agreed to the idea with no intentions of using it. Years later, we're talking at the release party for the sequel to Def Jam Vendetta. Ghostface approached Holmes and shouted, "Yo, what the fuck happened to my eagle?" One thing that stuck out to me as odd is a complete lack of weapons. There's not a single foreign object in this game in which we can use to blast our opponent upside the head, and that's a bummer. I love foreign objects.
Foreign objects!
Although DJV boasts a fairly large and creative roster, the way it's laid out kind of reminds me of PS1's WCW vs. the World. That game is headlined by WCW, sure, but only a fraction of the playable characters are actually wrestlers from WCW, with the remaining slots being filled by fictional grapplers. Of Def Jam Vendetta's 44 roster slots, only 12 are actual, real-life Def Jam signed rappers. This might be a bummer to some, but I'm not complaining. I was only 13 when this game came out, and I hadn't much exposure to rap music. At that specific point in time, I only knew who maybe 5 or 6 of these guys even were. I looked at the fictional characters the same way I did someone like Method Man. I thought they all had their own pluses and minuses as playable characters. Much like each of the 12 arenas we can fight in, some of them were cool, some were kinda lame. Looking back, sure, it would have been awesome to see other real-life performers on the roster, but again, I'm not complaining. It's still crazy to me that this game even exists. Def Jam Vendetta, somehow, was completed on time and did indeed debut just 8 months after the main idea was nailed down. The game is admittedly a little bare bones in the features department, with no specialty matches to speak of, but it's hard to fault a team for lack of extra features when their timetable for completion was so close to its date of inception. It wasn't Aki's fault that we didn't get tables and ladders, it's EA's fault for demanding the game be completed and shipped in just over half a year. Despite these shortcomings, Def Jam Vendetta's release on April 1st, 2003 saw the game earn largely positive reviews. IGN highlighted the game with an Editor's Choice Award and scored it an 8.9 out of 10. Def Jam Vendetta is a really good game. It's an extremely original idea, and its mere existence shows a publisher and developer working together and taking a chance on something strange, and it's a chance that paid off. Def Jam Vendetta doesn't just play well, it doesn't just look good. It makes a statement. It makes a statement in how ridiculous it is to see rappers wrestling. It makes a statement in its cultural reach with its predominantly African American cast, which unfortunately isn't something we see very often in games. It makes a statement in its legacy, which spawned 2 sequels in the following several years. It's crazy to think what would have happened had EA not lost the WCW license. With less pressure on the team and a much longer development cycle, there's an argument to be had that with Aki at the wheel on powerful consoles like the PlayStation 2 and GameCube, that the would-be Mayhem 2 could have been the best WCW game ever released. That's not the hand we were dealt, but hey, I am not upset that Def Jam Vendetta is the game that rose from those ashes.
Watch him bust his ass! Man, come on, y'all. Give me somebody who can really handle.
Dans, this was my Triangle X Squared Circle retrospective on 2003's Def Jam Vendetta. If you liked this video, please consider dropping by patreon.com/616entertainment to show your support for the channel. I can't wait for August 12th when we set our Triangle X Squared Circle sights on 2008's TNA Impact, a game that is not covered enough, and I can't wait to delve into it. I love you, and I'll see you next time.